बट ज्वाइन मैं कर चुका हूँ, जैसे स्टार्ट नहीं हुआ अभी।
कौन सा करेगा?
सीखो
कह रहे हैं
6-5 में। वो दिख रहा है तेरे को उधर?
10 वेटिंग में आ गए।
13
Nice. आ गया हूँ मैं लाइव।
थोड़ा सा मैं
Welcome everyone who has joined. I hope you guys are doing well wherever you are. We'll be starting in few minutes. Till that time you can tell me in the chat box if my screen is visible and if I'm audible. B Sai Ritesh C, all good, how are you? Yes, I'm from DTU. Visible and audible, that's great. We'll start in a minute. Thanks Mukul for the heads up. Thanks Manohar, hello. Yes, B Sai Ritesh, I am from DTU. Chandan Srivastav, thanks for letting me know that I'm audible as well as visible. So we'll start in a minute. Till that time you can take out your notebooks and start taking your notes, or as you feel comfortable. It's better to have notebooks and pens in hand so that you can write notes in case you find something insightful that might help you in the interviews coming ahead. Okay, so we'll get started now. So welcome everyone once again to the live Guesstimate session. We at Seekho are trying to provide best in class learning to our community and to provide as much as jobs as possible to the community which is learning from us and across the globe. Thanks for joining us from wherever you are. Today we'll be taking a session on guesstimates, how to solve guesstimates, what are the frameworks for solving estimates, and we'll be discussing about it. So about myself, my name is Manik and I'm currently in my final year at our Delhi College of Engineering, which is also known as Delhi Technological University. I have worked at OYO, EY and Invest India. My intern at OYO was basically as a product analyst, which is my latest experience. Apart from that, I worked with EY and Invest India, which was my consulting domain interns, and that has helped me to crack my job at Bain's backend office, which is known as Bain Capability Network, and I will be joining that in June as an analyst. My hobbies are reading about personal finance, going to the gym, and playing cricket. I take my inspiration from Virat into the field and gives his 100% to whatever he is doing. The place that I want to visit, or you can say it as my dream. I have a plain and simple agenda for today. We'll be discussing about what a guesstimate is, why is it necessary to solve guesstimates. Then we'll be proceeding towards how to solve guesstimates. We'll be discussing about what is a constraint based approach for solving estimates. Since we know about three frameworks for solving estimates, we'll be discussing about the constraint based approach. We'll be solving some live guesstimates, and in the end I'll like to tell you about the resources which might help you in preparing for your interviews. So just give me a heads up if you guys are in touch and you have an idea about what we'll be discussing today. So we'll start after that. Okay, so basically what guesstimates are? Guesstimates are a very crucial and integral part of consulting because there are a lot of use cases of guesstimates in consulting. Guesstimates are also known as back of envelope calculations, and they have different use cases. For example, in case you are launching a new product into a new market and you have no idea about what can be its market size, how can you market it and stuff like that, then for estimating the market size of a specific product, you will have to prepare a guesstimate. Then in case you are in case you are adding a new and you are suggesting some changes to your client, then you need to tell and calculate the impacts of new feature that you are launching, and you need to be very data sufficient with your approach that you are taking. In interviews, guesstimate are not about how you reach to an answer, but more about what you do in your approach, and hence a structured approach is very important in a guesstimate. Since guesstimates are very open-ended questions, they do not have any specific answers. Anybody can take any kind of assumptions and can reach to any answer, but the most important and most integral part of a guesstimate solving is to remain structured and remain very thoughtful. Are you taking? Every assumption that you take needs to have some backing, needs to have some thought. For example, if you are assuming the population of Bihar, so what you can assume that you know the population of UP to be around 18 to 20 crores, and hence you can take an assumption that Bihar's area would be like 30 to 40% lesser than UP, and hence both the states have similar population density. Hence the population of Bihar would be 22 or 30% or 40% lesser than UP. So on approximate measures, the population of Bihar might lie between 11 to 12 CR, and by taking round offs and assumptions, you can reach to any answer because you need not to enter into a fixed criteria. You just need to be very structured and thoughtful with your approach. Now about how to solve guesstimates. So a lot of you have told in the chat box that you know a bit about guesstimate solving, but we'll be discussing three basic frameworks for solving guesstimates. We know that you can solve any guesstimate either by supply side or by demand side, but it is very important to know when to use demand side approach. And the third framework is a calculative approach, which involves a lot of calculation and is more data intensive. Now we know that we have three approaches: supply side, demand side, and calculation based. But how do you choose a right approach for solving a guesstimate or a question, or when an interviewer asks what would be the right approach, then you need to ask. Then we have a constraint based method. What do you mean by constraint based method? Basically, when you get confused by which approach to take, you just think of a parameter that is not going to change even if the other parameters increase exponentially. For example, if I take if an interviewer gives me a question of finding the number of airplanes that take off from an air, the population might increase, the number of air fleet that we have might increase, but the number of runways cannot increase overnight, which would mean that the number of runways in case of a question that involves airplanes, that would be a constraint. What problems you can solve through demand side and what problem you can solve through a calculative approach. For example, in case of supply side, what problems ideally you need to take when you are solving like a supply side problem. If you need to estimate the number of flights that are taking off from Delhi airport, then you can take supply or demand. But if you think of a constraint, here the constraint is the number of runways, which mean that there is a supply side constraint. We cannot increase the number of runways overnight, and hence we cannot increase the supply, which would mean that this problem can be solved through a supply side approach. When you try to solve it through a supply side approach, you will get a fixed number of runways, and you can assume other parameters which would give you to take an assumption about the area of Delhi, what would be the forest cover, what would be the factory cover, what would be the school cover, what would be the constructed length, and hence you can find out an estimated road length in Delhi. So I believe that we have talked about the approaches. Now there is a time to ideally go through live examples where you will be learning about how to solve these problems in specific. So we'll be taking two examples, one from the supply side and one from the demand side. Both these problems can be solved through both approaches, supply as well as demand. No approach is wrong or right, but the point is, in an interview, when we need to solve a question, we have a fixed amount of time. When we need a fixed amount of time, when we have a fixed amount of time, then we need to be very cautious of the approach that we are taking, because we cannot make the interviewer wait because of our approach, and hence we need to take the most optimized approach for any problem that is in front of us. So our first problem is to estimate the number of flights that are taking off from Delhi airport in a day. Now you can solve this example from both supply side as well as demand side. From supply side, you can simply think of a constraint. Here the constraint would be the number of runways, as we discussed, because you cannot increase the number of runways exponentially even if the demand for planes increases. Even if a large number of people want to take flights, we cannot take extreme number of people, since we have only 2 runways at IGI airport, and hence we cannot increase them exponentially overnight. So the first formula for solving while solving a guesstimate, what we do is we create a MISI structure. What is a MISI structure? It is mutually exclusive and cumulatively exhaustive, which would give us a formula for solving a guesstimate, and then we further break down into pieces which would give us an approximate answer for our guesstimate. So for the supply side, we can simply think of it as number of flights taking off equals to number of runways multiplied by the operational or flight to take off, which would give us an answer, which would be an approximate answer. In demand side, we can again calculate the same thing, but here the formula would become more bigger. The MISI structure would become more bigger, because for demand you need to calculate the number of check-in counters, you need to assume the number of terminals, you need to calculate the operating time of each terminal, then have to multiply it by the time taken by a single person entry, then you have to divide it by the capacity of one aircraft, and hence you will reach to an answer, which suggests us that supply side would be the optimized approach, but demand side is not the wrong approach. But here we'll be discussing the most optimized approach for this problem, which is the supply side approach, and we'll be discussing that. So before solving any guesstimate, you need to ask some clarifying questions, because guesstimates are very open-ended. Even if you look at the question problem statement, which is to estimate the number of aeroplanes taking off from Delhi airport in a day, this is a very open-ended statement. We do not have answers to few questions. So what you need to do before starting out or writing out your approach, you need to ask a few questions to the interviewer. These questions are called preliminary questions. For this case, we can think as do we need to consider only passenger flights? So here the interviewer might say that we need to consider both or passenger flight, but for the sake of this guesstimate, we'll take only passenger flights. Another question could be, we have gone through a pandemic, do we have to consider that airport is fully functional? And then interviewer would say that the airport might not be fully functional or fully functional, but for this case, again, we will take that the airport is fully functional. And even if the airport is not fully functional, we'll just divide the efficiency by 1.5 or whatever the assumption that interviewer throws to us, we'll solve it. Now, one more important question is that here the interviewer has not specified which Delhi airport is he talking about, since there are a lot of airstrips in Delhi. So we need to ask again that do we need to consider only IGI airport or other airstrips also? So the interviewer again can tell you about what specific he wants. But here we will solve for only IGI airport, since we need to be very precise with that time. Now, as discussed, we can solve this guesstimate both by supply side approach and demand side approach as well. By supply, we can easily think about the number. In demand side, we can think about the number of people who are wanting to travel by flights. But again, thinking of the constraint based approach, we need to think what is the constraint over here. Here, the constraint is the number of runways, because we cannot increase the number of runways overnight, and hence it would be a constraint in our example, which would mean that the constraint would be number of runways. Even if the demand increases exponentially, we cannot increase the number of runways overnight. So the general approach for solving this problem would be number of flights taking off equals to the number of runways multiplied by the operational hours of the airport divided by the time taken by one flight to take off. So we'll be solving it live in front of you. I hope my screen is visible. So number of taking off would be equal to number of runways multiplied by operational hours divided by time taken by each flight to take off. Here we know that the number of runways is fixed. We cannot change them. This is not an assumption. This is fixed. For IGI airport, the number of runways is 2. And operational hours, we know that operational hours of airport are 24 hours, but the airport does not run at 100% efficiency every hour. So we need to take that into consideration, and which becomes the most difficult part of this guesstimate. We can split these operational hours into 4 parts. First, we can think of 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. where the flight frequency is not that much. Then we can think of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., which would mean that the flight frequency is very high because a lot of business flights take at that time. And then we can consider 6 p.m. to 12 p.m. where again as too close to 100% efficiency, but still there is a lot of load. And the fourth part becomes the night part, which is 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. All these times have been taken in IST. At this time we have international flights, so we can consider that approximately 90%, approximately 80% efficiency would be for the airport would be running at 80% efficiency. From 6 p.m. to 12 p.m. the airport would be running at more than 80% efficiency, because at this time a lot of domestic flights take place, and the flight cost also reduces for late night flights, which would mean that a lot of travelers who do not want to burden their pockets would be traveling during this time. And hence, since the operation this is a fully functional airport, the efficiency would be closer to 90%. 6 p.m. The efficiency would be 100% in ideal cases scenario, because here a lot of business travelers would be traveling, and you need to consider that a lot of domestic flights also take place at that time. 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. the flights are again cheaper, and a lot of early travelers might want to go, but the efficiency is not at its peak. So we can consider that the efficiency of that airport is around 70%. Now if we calculate the total operating time, this would mean that there are 3 hours multiplied by 70% multiplied by 60 minutes for operating time in minutes. This would give us 100% multiplied by 9 hours multiplied by 60 minutes for the minute time. This would give us 0.9%, 90% multiplied by 6 hours multiplied by 60 minutes for operating time in minutes. Here we can calculate 0.8 multiplied by 6 hours again multiplied by 60 minutes. This would give us 7 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 60 would give us 126 minutes. This would give us 540 minutes. This would give us again 36 multiplied by 9, 324 minutes. This is 540, this is 324. 6 into 60 multiplied by 0.8 would give us 288 minutes. This would mean that this would be approximately 860. This would be approximately 1000, and 1 to 88 minutes approximately the airport is operational. Airport operational time is 1288 minutes. By calculating this efficiency, we have found this. Now this is we have found. Now we need to think that what is the time taken by each flight for takeoff. Now this is not a thing that you need to suffice or you need to calculate. This has to be a thing that you need to assume. So what you can assume, you can assume a time of 10 minutes, or you can assume a time of 5 minutes. But what you have to take into consideration that you cannot think but you have to justify your assumptions using something like that the airstrip generally takes 3 to 4 minutes to clear, and then you need to take clearances from ATC as well, which would mean that a general takeoff might take around 10 minutes. And hence, if we divide now, bringing this back, number of runways is 2, multiplied by total operational time is 1288 minutes, divided by 10 minutes for each flight to take off. This would give us 2 multiplied by 128 flights approximately, which would give us 256 flights approximately take off in a day. So number of airplanes that take off from IGI airport on a day is 256. Again, we have erased this, so now 256 is the number that we have reached to. Now the interviewer can ask you that you need to triangulate this data using a demand side approach. You can use that demand side approach. I like to give you think about this problem from demand side and send your answers to Seekho's email address, which you can find in the description box. And you can also check out Seekho Select Consulting membership for such events, which we keep taking regularly. And we have a select membership also. You can check out that details in the description box. And the task for this guesstimate would be to solve this guesstimate through demand side, and you can reach out to us Seekho's email address. So in case you need to take a snapshot of this problem, you can take a snapshot from your laptops or from your mobile phones, wherever device you have joined from. So once you take a snapshot, we'll be discussing the next question, which we will solve through a demand side approach. Since we have discussed an problem which extensively involves a supply side approach, we'll be going towards a demand side approach. Take your time, take a snapshot of this problem, and then we'll proceed with the next example. So again, repeating, your task is to think about this same problem from demand side. I have mentioned the formula in this example. You can use this formula. You can find an approach. You can select. You can choose. You can elaborate this approach, and you need to send your answers to the Seekho's email ID, which we'll give either in our comment section or we'll give in the description box, or you can reach out to us via Seekho Select membership, the details for which are present in the group description. Now we'll be proceeding towards our second example, which is how many air conditioners are sold in Delhi in an year. Both these problems that we are discussing today are asked in different interviews. Even I was asked the second guesstimate in my interview at BCN. So now we'll be discussing this problem, and this is very close. This is a very common example that is, and you will find this example on different websites as well, and we'll be discussing this as well. So again, you can solve this example using supply side or demand side. The formulas for both, the McKinsey structure for both I have written. In supply side, the number of ACs would have to be found out by multiplying the distributors to the multiplied by the number of zones, multiplied by the storage capacity, which have to be divided by the space occupied by one AC. But in demand side, you have to just calculate the number of families who have the affordability to buy an air conditioner. Then you have to multiply it by the number of ACs that they might have, and then you need to calculate the new ACs that are bought in the market due to the economic growth of India. So again, repeating the constraint based method, even if I increase the demand, even if I air conditioner by 10x, Indian audience cannot still go and buy an air conditioner, since an air conditioner is an expensive product. Since air conditioners are an expensive product, and they need and you need to have an amount of 50,000 in your pocket, and a lot of people in India unfortunately cannot buy it. So demand side would make the ideal approach for this problem. Again, before starting any guesstimates, you need to ask your preliminary question, which are also known as clarifying questions. These questions will help you to boil down to a structure. This will help you to reach to a conclusion where you can from where you can boil down to an answer, from where you can calculate an approach. So preliminary question for this case would be, if you need to consider commercial or domestic air conditioners as well. So here you will be calculating only about domestic air conditioner. Now there are different types of air conditioners in terms of wattage, and there are split ACs, window ACs as well. So what we need to assume? So for this case, we again consider that it is a split 2-ton AC and it is only sold, just for the sake of this case. Reiterating the same, repeated again and again, we can solve this problem using supply as well as demand, but here the constraint is the income of people, which will optimize the approach, and hence we'll have to go with the demand side approach. Now the Macy structure would give us number of ACs equals to replacement ACs plus new ACs. Replacement ACs would mean the number of families who can buy, multiplied by the number of ACs divided by the replacement rate of ACs. If you think of this problem, you can divide it into two parts. One would be the new ACs that are bought, the first time buyers. Second would be the repeat buyers, the people who like a lot of people in your houses, you might have an air conditioner but it is not working that well, or you need to upgrade to a new model, and hence you change your air conditioner, which is known as replacement ACs. And new ACs are basically the people who are first time buyers. So we'll again go on to solving this problem. So we know that now we have discussed that number of ACs that are sold would equal to replacement ACs plus new ACs. This would be first time buyers and these would be the replaced ACs. Now since we are taking a demand side approach, we need to do an income based segregation. The population of Delhi, you know, is 2 CR. Even if you don't know, you need to take an approximate guess about what would be the population of Delhi, and this has to be backed by assumptions in case you do not know about the population of Delhi. But it is ideal to remember a few population. It would help you to extrapolate or interpolate data in case you get any other state. So you can remember a few states. So you can divide this population into three segments: the rich class, the middle class, and the poor class. On a normal level, 20% people in Delhi belong to the rich class, 40% belong to the middle class, and 40% belong to the poor class. Since air conditioner is an expensive product, it costs you around 50k. The poor might not be able to buy it since their income level does not lie in that range. Their mean income is generally around 1 lakh, and they hence cannot spend an item which is 50k. They cannot splurge money worth 50k if their income is 1 lakh. So we can just neglect this portion for the sake of this question. Which would give us that 80 lakh people, 0.2 multiplied by 2 CR people are rich, and 0.4 multiplied by 2 CR people are in the middle class, which would give us 80 lakh people here and 40 lakh people. Replacement factor, which would mean that after this amount of year, these families would have to replace their AC, which would give us, if we take the replacement rate to be 15 years, since at my home we changed our AC after 15 years, you can take this assumption to be 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, depending upon what your ideology is, what your methodology is. For my case, I have taken this 15 years, since my home at my place, I have replaced it after 15 years. So 2 lakh ACs will get sold every year from the replacement rate due to the replacement of ACs. But these are not the only number of ACs that you will be selling. There will be new ACs as well. Here if you think, then we have taken only 10 lakh people. Why we have taken only 10 lakh people? Because 50% of the population is in the lower middle class range and they do not have the income spending power to buy an AC. But if you take India's growth to be approximately 8% or 10%, which is generally the case with the economic growth, which would mean that the income level of the population would also be increasing at 8 to 10%. Even if 10% of this population increases their income level by 8% or 10%, they might be able to buy an air conditioner, which would mean an additional of 8 to 10% would be able to buy air conditioner. Taking this to be the lower strata, 0.8 multiplied by 10 lakh would give us 80k people. So these are the first time buyers. First time buyers equals to 80k, and the sum total of replacement rates and the first time buyers would give us the total numbers which are being bought in an year in Delhi. So 2.8 lakh ACs are being bought every year in Delhi. Now in case you need to take some snapshots of this problem so that you can reconsider it. Again, food for thought. You need to take up a task that you need to solve this problem via the supply side. The formula for the same has been given in this slide. You can take a snapshot of this slide, and you need to send your answers for the supply side approach to Seekho Select email ID, or you can take up the Seekho Select membership from the details that are given in the description box. Sorry. So you can take the snapshot of this image which would help you in understanding in detail about how we have solved this problem. You can take a snapshot from your mobile, your laptops, from whatever device you are joining. And these were the two questions that we solved today, and now will be courses that you might need to solve guesstimates. So talking about the resources, so for guesstimate you do not need any kind of specific resources. You can take any problem statement in the world with a buddy of Seekho, with anyone which can help you in your preparation, which is interested in consulting. You can solve it with them, and once you solve it with them, you will get an idea of what approach you are taking. It is always better to have 2 to 3 approaches in your pocket, since sometimes the interviewer asks you to triangulate your answer using some other approach. Hence it is always better to keep more than one approach in hand. So I'll now take some questions from the chat box. B Sai Ritesh C has said that he was asked a question on how many iPhones are sold in an year. So B Sai Ritesh, you can take this problem, you can solve this problem from demand side, since iPhone is an expensive product, and you can calculate, you can go by the income level distribution. Similar problem to what we have solved with the number of ACs, so that is not a problem. Mujib Khan says that how come time taken for single person is helping out this demand approach while calculating the number of flights. Time taken by single in the demand approach you are asking. So I'll tell you that when you are taking a demand side approach, you need to estimate that how many people can enter a check-in counter, and hence they will basically reach to the flight. So you need to consider that how many people are basically checking in, and what number of time is being taken for their security check-in and stuff like that. So that is why you need that thing. In case you need to know more about this problem, we can discuss it in detail. Even if you need to solve the supply side as well, you can reach out to us on Seekho's email ID. You can take the membership of Seekho Select, where we'll be guiding you one-on-one, and we'll be taking a lot of mock interviews as well. So you can always reach out to us in case you want to get into the details of how more guesstimates are solved. I'll wait for few more minutes for people to join to ask questions in case somebody has questions. So thank you everyone for joining. In case you need to take snapshots, you can take, and you can discuss approach. You can get back to us in case of any doubts, in case of any queries. We will get back to. We'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. It is always better to, since we organize a lot of events, it is better to take a Seekho Select membership because you will get access to unlimited events across